we'll get started. A couple of reminders, of course. I think everybody here, raise your hand if you know what's happening on November 13th. And then, of course, no gathering because that's the day of the train show. And then our meeting is the following Saturday after the train show. And we have a contest, of course, in November, displays, which we're going to be sending the pie card out tomorrow. Bob's finished it up and we'll be sending it out tomorrow. So while you're waiting for the trick-or-treaters to bang on your door or in between, you can be reading the pie card. So Russell, would you give an introduction, please, to our first presenter?
Hey, before we get going, a quick, whoever's listening in today and maybe later on YouTube, that always, I think today's a good example that both Mike and Chris have been working on some projects there that I think will be useful to us all. So if you have something, a building, a chunk of the layout that you'd like to show off, this is the great time to do it. And we're always interested in having more participants in this. So speaking of that, our Mike Barry's been working on another Arduino application, and I think this is going to be pretty neat. So Mike, tell us all about it, please.
Thanks, Russ. Appreciate it. First off, some of you may remember that a little over a year ago on Zoom, I did a Arduino clinic. It was titled, What is an Arduino and Why Should I Care? Part 2. It was a follow-up to the first one, which was done live pre-COVID back in 2019. Well, the part 2 one was, first part of it was just a review of the original clinic, but the bulk of it was demonstrating 2 nice applications, projects using Arduinos in model railroading. The first one of those projects was a grade crossing with lights, gates, sound, the whole deal, using an Arduino. And then the second one of those projects that from that clinic was this little guy. This was called DCC++. And what this is a DCC command station. This one can take up to 3 amps, so it's enough to run a small to maybe a medium-sized layout. Everything you need is here for a DCC unit, similar to maybe a Digitrax starter system or the NCE starter system. The deal with this one was that it had to be connected to a computer because it used the JMRI programming to actually run the DCC system. In fact, the part of JMRI called Panel Pro, and in there it has a screen adaptation of a throttle, and you would use that to actually run the train through this. Works very well. And I mentioned then probably the biggest application for most of us with this would be using it as a computer interface between a laptop, say, or some type of computer, and your test track. So you could program locomotives instead of buying the $130 Digitrax or whomever, name a brand interface. You can use this. It was probably about $35, and then use it to use Decoder Pro on JMRI to program locomotives. Works very, very well for that, and it's quite a bit cheaper. Today, I'm back, and I guess we're going to call this Arduino part 2.1, because instead of this DCC++, and you notice it is the, on the bottom of this thing is the your Arduino Uno, the generic, the basic Arduino board. You see here the bottom of it, and then there's what's called a shield stuck on top of it. This is the motor driver. In other words, it carries the extra current needed to actually run the trains, because you can't run that much current through the Arduino. It takes like a ½ amp max, and then it's just kind of toast after that. So you put this extra board on top of it, and they just stack together. You can see the pins on the bottom of it, and then the female part on the board, and then they just snap together, and there you go. Well, what I got now has been called on 3 or 4 different YouTube sites that I have seen a game changer. This works off of the DCC++ idea, except now, here it is. This is DCC++EX. No less a mouthful. They could seemingly come up with a better name, but that's what it's called. This one, instead of using the Arduino Uno version, like I said, your standard Arduino, this one has a Mega on the bottom of it. You can see the difference in the size. They still use the same programming. They're both Arduinos, but the Mega is physically larger because it has a lot more input and output areas, and it has more memory in it. And that's why it's on this project. This again is a fully functional DCC command station. Name your brand, Digitrax, NCE, whatever. That's what this is, except this one is different from the other one in that this one has a Wi-Fi board on top of it. This one is totally self-contained. There is no computer hookup. What you see is it, okay? This has the Arduino, like I mentioned. The middle shield or board is that motor driver board again. And then the one on top, like I mentioned, is a Wi-Fi router. All snapped together. And then it's wired. This pair of wires actually goes to the track. These are the go to your power bus, let's say. And then there's 2 power supplies. One here, you see here with this connector on it. This is a 5 amp power supply now. This is a full 5 amp system now. And this is your track power supply. It goes into the motor shield and then comes out here to the track. The other power supply, kind of down here on the bottom, it plugs right into the Arduino. And this is a little ½ amp 9-volt thing just to power the Arduino. You can see the green light on the Arduino. So it has 2 power supplies, but no computer hookup. This is it right here. It's totally wireless, and it works by using your cell phone. You use the free app on your cell phone. Mine happens to be an Android, so I use a program called Engine Driver. If you have an iPhone, they have the same type of program for iOS, and it's called WeThrottle. So depending on your phone, that's what you use to control your trains. No computer. Works amazingly well. I'll show you here in a minute. And as with the original DCC++, this thing is free. The programming is free. The download for your phone is free. All you have to buy is the hardware. This is like 60 bucks sitting here in my hand. That's it. The programming is online, and it has full 5 amp capability. Same thing as your regular Digitrax or NCE programming, or command station, I mean, excuse me. So it is a big deal. It's a lot nicer setup than the other DCC++, the one I had before, simply because you're not tied to a computer. You can take this now on your layout and stick it under your layout someplace out of the way. And all you have are the 2 wires going to your power bus and your 2 plug-ins for the power supplies. You're ready to go. It will also, as is, there's programming already in it, so that you can control turnouts. If you have stationary decoders on your turnouts, in other words, you have them hooked up to something like a Digitrax DS64 or some other stationary decoder where your turnouts have numbers to them, you can control them using your cell phone also. And that's built right into the programming right now. So you can control turnouts. Right now, this will handle 4 different cell phones at the same time. Each phone, if you're slick enough, can operate 6 locomotives at once. I don't know how you would do that, but it is capable of that. Now, you could consist some together, but the point is that, you can run a good size layout with this deal. And so what I want to do now is just kind of demonstrate here a little bit. So if you'll excuse the shakiness here, I'm going to move it down. See, we got to see the locomotive there.
Hey, Mike,
Yes, sir.
Russell here. So you said like 6 locomotives, but with that, I guess, speaking of like strictly DCC, how many addresses when you're talking about, or you talked about you could control your turnouts with them, but so if address is not the right term for the Arduino, then how many, I guess, slots maybe between engines and turnouts could this puppy have?
No, to my knowledge, Russ, it'll run 6 different locomotives and the turnouts as you get to them. Just like on the, say, this Digitrax throttle that I have just here for demonstration, just to remind people what, all the buttons on them. Same way with this one, you can control 2 consists, we'll say, and more with this if you're adept enough at it. I'm not, but some people I guess are. You can keep punching here and move from one locomotive to another, or one consist to another, and it'll just keep adding up. And the turnouts are on a whole separate function of the engine driver, not just related to the 6 locomotives. So it's an additional function until you run out of amperage, and that's going to be the limiting factor, just like it always is with DCC, is having enough juice, especially if you're running a lot of sound locomotives. But yeah, the turnouts don't take up any of the places for locomotives.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Mm-hmm. So anyway, like I mentioned, and this is on, as you can see, got the light on, and so what I have to do here, besides my fingerprint, come on, phone. And what I found out earlier when I was testing it, no matter where I put the phone, you can't read what's on there because there's a glass screen, and a glass screen adds up to double glare. So you have to kind of believe me when I tell you what some of this stuff says. But anyway, you see the app right there, and you just, yeah, make a liar out of me. There we go. All right, this pops up. This is the kind of like opening screen of engine driver. It's a little short on theatrics, but that's a good thing. And what it says here in this white box that you can't read. It says connect. And then right here is this Wi-Fi's name. It says DCCEX, and then there's 6 characters after that, which I think is a MAC address. But anyway, it just says DCCEX. Because the telephone, before we got on line here, I switched my phone from the house Wi-Fi to this one. So now it shows up here, and all you have to do is click on that, and now it's now the engine driver, the phone is connected to this system. We are now part of this deal. And now this big white box is wanting to know what locomotive do you want? So let's go ahead and hook to this one. Oh, come on. Excuse me for a second here. When I moved it, I hit the reset button on it like a big dummy.
I'll cut this part out of the video that I post to YouTube, Mike.
Well, yeah.
I just put a big sign on it. Mike made a boo-boo.
Yeah, Mike did. Mike fat fingered it. And I don't know what's, oh, I know what I did. Shoot. Excuse me.
Don't feel any pressure, Mike. Nobody's paying attention.
Yeah, I know. That's the sad part. Nobody is paying any attention. Now there's a button on the side of this Wi-Fi right here. And when I happened to move it a moment ago, I hit that button. And when it did, it reset, which then dumped it off the phone. The phone automatically went back to the house Wi-Fi. All right.
Don't you just love live TV, huh?
Yeah, buddy.
Hey,
I won't tell you how many times I've played with this beforehand. It worked like a champ. All right, now we're back.
this is a live demo.
That's right.
I can loan you mine.
All right, we're back to here now, where it says select. So you hit there, and there's a couple of locomotives already in the roster here for me playing with it, that being one of them. And then on this screen, you can't see it again, but it right here is a little on off. What that did was turn the track power on. Now you see lights here. Now the sound is on the engine. We have acquired that engine, and there's a slider right here. There you go. See, it really does work. Now it has a panic stop in case all things go to hell, you just hit that. Otherwise, there's a regular stop here for the engine. You can change direction. And of course, you know, all the sound, you see all of the function buttons, just like on your regular throttles are here. Bell, horn. So it really does work. And and this is it right here. 60 something bucks. Uh-oh. So pick it up off the floor here in a minute. That's $60 in your phone. You got a fully functional, medium-sized layout system. And we can actually go down here now and pick up the other engine, which doesn't have sound, but you can see it's moving now. So I'm running 2 different locomotives now. I should speed that one up. Slow it down. At the same time, and I can just keep scrolling up and keep adding locomotives if somebody, like I said, I don't know how anybody does that, but it works that way.
Quick question, Mike.
Yes,
The,
sir.
we
Hang on
can't
a
really, we can't really see your phone there. So when,
Yeah.
does it showing the function buttons
Yeah, see
like
the,
F1, F2, or does it
Yeah,
actually have horn and?
yeah, well, it says
you-
F1 horn or F1 light and bell and that sort of thing, but then it goes to 3, 4, 5. You just can't, like I said, I tried this earlier and this white is easy to read, but it won't come up. Now you can kind of see it there.
Okay, yeah, yeah.
See, the top one is this engine here, and then down here, that's this engine over the other engine without sound. Just number 7, there's all it is. But you see the forward, reverse, the stop, and then
Yeah,
the
yeah.
slider. And there's about 4 different ways you can configure the screen. You can make the sliders go up and down if you want. You can reconfigure it to suit yourself. This is the generic one, the one that comes up when you first start the app. But you can get in there and customize it in a lot of different ways. And that's why I really like it. Now, one of the,
Hey, Mike, before you go on, but
Yes,
that is the standard Android engine driver app.
correct, the free,
I want to make sure everybody understands it is not unique to what you're showing us today for the Arduino. This is the app that you could use if you go over to Tom Gunther's, for ops, you can load this up on his system there.
exactly.
The
Yeah.
app goes. Just like I've got an iPhone and I use Wheat or Y driver or
Mhm.
Y throttle. Yeah, when I go over to Chris's, for example.
Yep, the systems are all designed. JMRI will also accept the wireless versions. So you could hook to this DCC++, my part 2 version. And then you could hook it up to JMRI and then still use this, but it would go from the phone to the computer to the Arduino. Whereas this one is just strictly here to here because it has its own Wi-Fi router built into it.
Yeah, and what I'm using, and I showed this a few months ago, several months ago, here in the basement when I bought that, what was that? The Wi-Fi tracks from that guy in Australia, where I plugged it into my NCE system, and now suddenly I've got, boom, I've got 4 engines that I can do, 4 throttles that I can do, and each of those can do 2 locomotives. This is even slicker though, because I don't even need my NCE system for what you're doing.
No, this is a total freestanding deal. And besides the fact that the DCC++ EX software is free, these guys are constantly working on this still. This is not a static thing at all. They have their own website with an automated downloader. You don't even have to go through the Arduino.ide site to do the download, upload to get the software from online into here. They have their own automated downloader on their DCC EX website. And they also talk about all the different facets that they're still working on. Like Arduino, if you look at online at Arduino equipment, the shields, the circuit boards that you can get, there already exists an Ethernet board where you can plug in like a Cat5 cable or something similar to that. The people that are developing this EX system are working now to integrate that board in here also. In other words, you can just keep stacking them. And what they want to do is to work it like similar to a local net, like you have on a Digitrax system, where not only could you, I don't know why you would want to have, throttle connections, but more importantly, you could connect multiples of these together on a large layout, like you do already. And you divide the layout up into power districts and have one of these controlling each or powering each power district, and then have one of them as the command station, just like you do now with a NCE or whomever system, so that you can have either 5 or 8 amps working on each individual power district and be able to run a lot more equipment and a lot larger layout using your basic system. So they're working on that. They've got a beta version of it out there that they're testing now. So it probably won't be too long before that facet will be back and be working out really well. They're also playing around, but they're going to have to get it built, I think, which would probably take forever. A 8 amp engine driver. This one is 5 amp max, and that's what I have. I have a 5 amp power supply hooked to it. They're working on an 8 amp version also. So it's great as is. If nobody was doing any developmental work on it anymore, it would be very, very nice to have. Like I said, there's a couple of websites, or excuse me, YouTube channels that I pay attention to. One of them is called DIY and Digital Railroad. Jimmy, as he calls himself, that runs that channel, has a ton of information on it. He's constantly putting out all kinds of stuff, and he has a huge Arduino segment on there where he does signaling and crossings and you name it with it. And then he's the one that I first saw where he was talking about this system here being the game changer, being the one that could really truly run layouts. But since then, I've seen other YouTube channels pretty much use the same wording, like, you know, they're this is what is going to make the big manufacturers kind of flinch when people figure out that for about $60 worth of hardware and you know, in a couple hours of your time, you can have a system that works pretty well. Oh, another thing they're working on, and here again, I'm not sure why, except people already have the systems. They're working on a way that you can use existing throttles with this system through I guess like a local net, or I don't know how they're going to do that. That's just one of their projects they're working on, developing this system. Any other questions? Because that's really all I have on it.
Yeah, I got a quick question, Mike.
Yeah.
Do you happen to have a handout for your presentation today with a little shopping list of how I could?
No, but I
acquire
can
all
get
this
you
stuff?
one. I can get you one. If you go to DIY and Digital Railroad, the YouTube channel, and I'm serious, and you look up this DCC++EX on his channel, and it says right there on the title, Game Changer. Into his, on that particular video, you know, the part at the bottom underneath, he lists all of the parts and where to get them. These are Amazon where he bought them. But this one, there's 3 or 4 different kinds of Wi-Fi shields for Arduino. But for whatever reason, and that's way over my pay grade, this shield is the only one that really works. The other shields are Wi-Fi, but somehow in the programming in the sketch, this is the one you need, this particular one. But it's listed, but I can put that out. That's no problem. I can, if people are interested, I'd be happy to give out a little hardware list for that for sure.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's do that, Mike, and if you send it to me, then I'll share it with the group.
Okay. Yeah, you know, it seems simplistic on the surface, but it's not. You know, I mean, it does what it says it'll do, and it really is any other question?
Mike, Russell again, I just wanted to, so, you know, you'd go to the website and you would download the magic right there to that Arduino. And then that's it. Then, like I said, all you have to do is mirror up whatever phone you have, and you're in business, right?
Yep.
Okay.
I mean, there's a couple of setup things that they explain on that DCC EX website. But you know, it's pretty straightforward. You know, obviously you got to have the computer to upload the sketch into the Arduino. And you see two wires here that kind of stick up. I have to figure out a better way to do that. But what it's doing, it's connecting the receive and transmit input outputs on the Arduino Mega to the input output, or transmit receive, I should say, on the actual Wi-Fi router directly. That's why it's got two wires. Otherwise, there wouldn't be anything on it. They all just stack together, and all of the communication goes through all the different pins that are all plugged together.
One thing you do have to do with your mobile phone is, if you use mobile data, you need to shut, well, on some phones, not all, most phones, you need to shut off mobile data, because otherwise the Wi-Fi router gets confused as to what it's trying to connect to. It's not sure if it's connecting to your local Wi-Fi or to your mobile internet connection. Notwithstanding, you know, that you already have your home Wi-Fi shut off. So all you really have to do is turn off mobile data. Sometimes if you can't get connected to your device, that's the reason, is because you got mobile data.
Now, what
enabled.
I ran into with this Arduino phone of mine was when the first time I connected, was if the phone didn't want to connect to this Wi-Fi, it saw it, it detected it, but it didn't want to connect to it because it wasn't hooked to the internet. It gave me a big, you know, we don't want to go there because it's not part of the internet. So you have to give it a couple of clicks around that to say connect anyway, and then it will. And I didn't have to do anything with my mobile data. That's still active on this phone. And I didn't turn off the house router, and that's what got me a little while ago when I moved it and reset this one, because the phone automatically goes back to the house one. And as soon as I take the power off of this, I don't have to put it back on the house Wi-Fi. It automatically goes back to that. So that's what caught me a little while ago, because then it went automatically back to the house deal.
How long has this technology been going, or how long ago they started?
Well, Arduinos were developed about 16, 17 years ago.
Yeah. Okay.
This one, the Uno.
Right.
This, the DCC plus
Yeah.
plus EX, is probably 6 months old, maybe.
Okay. So
Yeah.
it's probably still in development.
Oh,
And
it is
wait
very much
another,
so. Yeah.
another 6 months, you use your hand and that's it. I mean, you know, you won't need a phone.
Well, it's no telling where it's going to end up. None of
Yeah.
us know that.
Okay.
But it's fully functional right now, regardless of if they develop anything else to add on to it or not. It works very well right now. You just can't use it for a really large layout because 5 amps.
That'll
for
be
the layout
solved.
Yeah, that 5 amps won't cut it. But as soon as they get the Ethernet thing going, whatever they end up calling it, that'll change that whole situation then.
Any other
Well-
quick questions here for Mike
Yeah,
before
yeah,
we
we need to
move
get
on
on.
to Mr. Broughton?
Yeah, we
Well,
need to-
just
Go on, Chris.
Just,
We'll say
a
just for-
comment.
Just for a little perspective, I don't know if anybody remembers the series that Model Railroader did probably 35 years ago. It was back in the 80s when DCC had just been conceived of. They ran a series of articles on how to build your own DCC system, and it had the artwork for having your circuit board etched and drilled, all the where to solder all the components. It was all through hole stuff. It was like a Heath kit for DCC systems. And to go from that to a $35 Arduino and a software download, it just gives you a little perspective about how much this technology has advanced over the
Yep.
years.
And guys, you know, for those of you who have been over to run my railroad, you know, I have, of course, the command station and then a booster. And I have the RR circuits amp meter on them. And as large as my layout is and everything on it has sound, I've only seen like about 2.5 amps between the two, you know, between the command station and the booster. So, you know, really, Mike and guys, that you can do a heck of a lot with 5 amps.
Yeah.
Yeah.
While you have the floor, Russ, how about a quick introduction for Mr. Broughton?
Well, okay. Mike, thank you very much. Again, like kind of what Chris was saying, it's amazing how far this has come in recent years, months. So we thank you for that. And next up, we have Chris Broughton. And, you know, in the past, Chris has showed us some of his N-scale modulars that he has built and have been just gorgeous. So today, I think we're going to be just as amazed that he has a couple of the Free-moN modulars that he and a lot of the other local N-scale guys have built, and they'll have it at our train show in a couple weeks. So, Chris, let's see what you got there.
All righty. Let's see, share my screen. Okay, everybody see that?
Yeah.
Okay, so for the guys that have been to my house, you probably know by now my layout is based on Free-moN. It's a modular layout, which has served me well because this is the third house. Lived here for 10 years now, and that's the longest I've ever lived in one spot. But the components of that layout have lived in other homes, so it made it nice to be able to move those with me and not have to tear down a layout. So with that idea in mind, some of the guys and I came up with this idea of, hey, we should form a Free-moN group here. And so Bob Kukler and Paul Downs and Rick Maloney and a few of us have done this. And one of the modules, the module I had at the show 2 years ago, is a key part of my layout. And it's with my layout being in the basement and that module being 2 feet wide and 6 feet long, it is challenging, to put it mildly, to get it in and out of the basement and leaving it intact. So after a couple of times of having near heart failure getting it out, I decided it was time to build some modules that were dedicated for taking to shows. So I wanted to design them to be smaller, so they're easier to transport, easier to get in and out of the basement. And then some transport friendly features like legs that are actually attached to the module that fold up, recessed turnout throws, things of that nature. So in our group, the last time we set up, we had a series of modules, and they each represented like a little town or locale, and we really didn't have a good way to turn trains or to build trains and terminate trains and etc. So our group needed a yard. So I thought, okay, this is great. I can build a transportable module or set of modules and fill a need for our group. So we kicked some ideas around regarding a track plan and designed around the idea that it would be an 8-foot long yard broken up into 2 4-foot modules. And the modules are 18 inches wide instead of 2 feet wide. So it makes them easier to get in and out of the basement, but functionally it functions as one large 8-foot module. And So what I did was I had some lumber cut. I wasn't sure what to do with it, but I finally, now that I knew what I was going to do, I started building the module, and it's just it's a basic frame. It's built to Free-moN specs with the end plates being 6 inches tall and 3/4 inch plywood. And that's where they clamp, the modules will clamp together. And then most of the modules I've seen have separate legs that just sort of slide into slots on the end. And rather than having to carry those separately, I thought, it'd be a lot easier if they were just attached to the module. So I looked around and settled on the idea of using hinges, and I wasn't sure about what to do. I actually used two different types of hinges. One is hard to they both lock. When the legs are down, they lock into position. The set in the photo here on the left side of your screen, that's the more rigid set. It's a little harder to unlock, but once they do lock, they are impressively sturdy. So there's not a lot of wobble. The other set I use are easier to unlock, but they're not nearly as sturdy. So these are the ones, if I were going to do it again, I would use these. I may go back and replace the other ones with these. The middle photo shows you the module with the legs folded up. Obviously they had to be offset at each end so they wouldn't bang into each other. So they sort of, lace together as they're folded up. And I just use clamps, or I actually put one of those little sliding locks like you see on like a hotel door. Put one of those on there, but I'm probably going to hold them up for carrying the module. And then the other picture shows them with the legs extended. And with both modules built, I have them clamped together in the basement, getting ready to start laying track. But as I've said, the legs are offset, the hinges lock when they're extended, and then the modules per Free-moN specs are just clamped together using C-clamps. And for the track, one of the features or requirements of Free-moN is that the track at the module boundaries is on the center line of the module. So I've got that marked out, and you can see where I'm kind of laying out the yard and where the turnouts will go, so I can mark where to drill holes, etc. I use just regular cork road bed for the main, and for the yard area, I use craft cork. It comes in a roll, and it's slightly not as thick as standard cork road bed. I think it's an 1/8 inch thick, and the cork road bed's 3/16, but it worked great for a yard. It didn't need to have the same profile as the main line and whatnot. And then at the module boundaries, it's common to use 3/16 inch wood because it's obviously more durable than cork, and the ends of the modules can get bumped around during transport and can kind of cause the track or the cork to curl up. So using wood at the boundaries prevents that. And I just use basswood and bevel the edges to the same profile as the cork. So once it's painted and ballast is down, you don't really know it's any different. And then there's the fun task of wiring. Free-moN uses two buses. One is an accessory bus that supplies power to things like tortoise machines, lighting, signals, etc. And then they have the track bus that's fed from the DCC command station. When I first had people over to operate my layout when I lived over in Jeffersonville, as soon as one turnout was shorted, the entire layout went down. And so I thought there's got to be a better way to do this. And after doing some research, I found some circuit breakers by DCC Associates that work really well. And so what I did was I actually added a third bus to the modules that it's tied directly to the command station, but then that bus feeds the circuit breaker, and the circuit breaker is what feeds the track bus. So basically I've removed the track from being directly coupled to the command station. So now if there's, say, someone fouls a turnout on a module, the short is isolated to that module and it doesn't take the entire layout down. And the neat thing about this is it's still backward compatible with standard Free-moN specs. So, if I took it to a show with another Free-moN group, I could still plug in. It's still going to function exactly the same. The only difference is if there's a short on my module, it's going to be isolated to my module and not take the whole layout down. And we've adopted this scheme for our group, and so it prevents some heartburn if there's ever a derailment or there's an issue. So it's a little different than Free-moN, but it's still 100% compatible with Free-moN. And here I have the track painted and the deck painted. I use just camo brown from a rattle can from Home Depot for the track. It's a good burnt umber, I think, or color, but I like it for track. And so I do that first, and then the deck is painted a mud brown. And when I say mud brown, I'm not joking. I actually took a little baggie of dirt into Home Depot and had them color match it. So, because I sometimes use actual dirt on my layout. So, so if it ever runs thin, at least the color is a match and it's not as apparent. And for this part, the next part, I took it out to the garage. I've got the legs painted, the fascia mounted, not painted yet. This is where it got interesting. Like I said, I wanted to have recessed turnout controls, and all the turnouts on this module are manual. I use Blue Point turnout controls. They're actuated through an RC rod connected to a knob on the fascia panel. And so the fascia is about, what, a 1/4 inch thick, and then another 1/2 inch for the plywood side. So that gives us about 3/4 inch recess. And I cut those using a hole saw with a drill. And I've never done this before, so I wasn't real sure how it was going to turn out. And as I had commented at one point, I'm either recessing turnouts or I'm manufacturing sawdust by turning perfectly good modules into Swiss cheese. And I wasn't sure which way that was going to go, but it worked out. I used 1/4 inch plywood to glue behind, behind the holes for backing. And that's what the rods pass through for the controls. And so in the second photo there, you can see what the final result was, and it worked really, really well. The knobs are just wooden pulls that I got at a craft store. They are designed for, I think, a 3/16 inch dowel rod. So I use a dowel rod to fill the hole and then re-drill it to fit the RC rod and just glue them on once they're installed. And then the next part is ballast. And I use ballast from Scenic Express. It's a natural stone material. And I like the size and the texture, and it goes down real well. And so that's what I use for ballast. But yeah, had a lot of ballast to put down, obviously. And I've used a lighter gray on the main line, and then more of a cinder color for the yard. And then, of course, I had to smoke test it. So best way to do it was make a patch cable and just tie it into my existing layout. And once I did that, I was just able to turn on my layout and dial up a locomotive on the throttle and run it up and down the track and make sure everything worked as I expected it to. Now for the scenery, I wanted to keep it simple. The module you see in the background in these photos, especially there on the left, that's the one I was trying to take to shows, and it was just treacherous getting it out of the basement, especially with all those buildings. So this is more of a rural theme, and I wanted to break up the fields of static grass. So I staked out an area for a field of soybeans, and I kind of laid out where I wanted it on the layout and put down some actual sifted dirt. And then from there, I measured out rows with a ruler and marked them with a straight edge and a pencil, and then put the glue down straight from a Elmer's bottle along each of the lines, and then used medium green coarse ground foam and just pressed it down into the glue, let it dry, and then vacuumed up the loose parts. And what I got was what I hope looks like a field of soybeans. And one of the things I did, and you notice the big dirt area, that's John Vincent and I had this conversation about farm fields and headland where the tractor turns around. And that's something that is frequently, a lot of people will run crops right up to the fence, but in reality, the tractor has to turn around someplace. And so he actually had a diagram showing how to calculate it and where, all that. So I included a little space for the tractor to turn around. And then the fence around the field is it's actually Woodland Scenic's in-scale barbed wire fence. And I'd never used it before, but I really like it. It was easy to install. It looks really good. It's a nice product. I was real happy with it. So that's how I did the fence around the field. And the rest of it is just static grass. For in-scale, I use 4 millimeter grass, and I mix a late summer and a fall color. So one's more green, one's more brown. This kind of gives it a nice mixture, and it's not as monotone. There's a little variety. And a trick I learned from a group that I'm in on Facebook, it's Fred's in the group too. It's the micro layout, small and micro layout group. A couple of guys there had updated their layouts, and rather than taking up the ground foam, they just put the glue down right over top of the ground foam and then applied the static grass, and it gave it a really nice uneven texture. And so I thought, I'm going to put down some ground foam and try to mimic that same look. And that's where some of the clumps are. There's actually ground foam underneath, like clumps of ground foam underneath that. And it gives it a kind of a more of a brushy kind of feel, I think, instead of looking like a manicured field.
Hey, Chris, I'm going to jump in for a minute. Yeah, I am a member of that group, and I've heard this, and what that reminded me of is the loose sassy ground goop being put on first.
The ground view.
The loose sassy ground goop,
Yeah.
Remember, he has that special formula for that, and that's exactly what it reminded me. It was like, well, yeah, that's kind of what he does, except you're just going over old crap. So yeah, I think you kind of replicated that in a cheap and easy way. Yeah,
and I wish I had picked up on that, because last year I replaced some of the turf on my main layout with static grass, and I actually took up some of the ground foam, but then I found it's like, well, this is too uniform. So I had to go back with, like buffalo grass and other things to try to recreate that after the fact. But had I known, it's like, wow, that would have made life a lot easier, just putting it over what I already had, and had a better result too. So live and learn.
Yeah, and Chris, Russell here, that a couple of weeks ago we had a fellow from a different division saying about static grass. And matter of fact, he quite often would use, like I said, either put the ground foam down first, or start off with a smaller millimeter, and then add not for the whole thing, but here and there some longer millimeter grasses. So yeah. Like,
there's some cool stuff you can do with
starting this, huh?
What's that?
Where were you when I was starting this?
Yeah, because it's, initially when I first started messing around with static grass, I was thinking it was a either or. You use ground foam or you use static grass, and it's absolutely not. It's definitely you use both, and the two together really enhances the effect. It gives you an effect that you can't get from either one by themselves. And like you said, mixing colors and lengths is great, especially if you're using just a little bit of the longer fibers mixed in. You get these like odd, tall weeds mixed in throughout your grass. So there's some great stuff you can do with it. It just takes a lot of experimenting, and I wish I had done more experimenting before I started going hog wild with it on my layout, but it turned out okay. It's still an upgrade from what it was. I wanted to have a small yard facility. I didn't want it just to be track and nothing else, so I used a couple of the Pike stuff structures for a small engine house and a yard office, and painted them up and built a concrete base for the engine facility. So when the rails pass through the building, you're actually on a concrete pad there and not just ground. And went through my parts box and found some detail parts laying around that I could use. And the sanding tower kit, I don't know how many years I've had that thing, but it finally found a home. And so I built it and put it on the layout. So just trying to, low budget operation and with some trash laying around. And I'm not sure any yard area or office area is neat and tidy. I'm sure they've got scraps and parts and things laying around. So tried to replicate that here. And
Hey,
that's
Chris,
it.
the guy sitting on the rail, an employee?
On the rail, I think he's walking next to the rail. He's not sitting, he's walking, and he's between the rail and the building. Yeah, it does look like he's sitting down on the rail, but yeah, no, he's not on the rail.
Yeah, otherwise he was getting ready to be an ex-employee.
Yeah. Or a bump stop.
Yeah.
Rail grease. So, but yeah, that really wraps it up. And the blue auto body shop is that's a structure that I had scratch built for one of my achievement awards. And it finally found a home too. So I was glad to be able to put that on there, and that kind of rounds it out. Like I said, it's mostly scenery. It's just very simple, but functionally, I think it's going to add a lot to the operations of our Free-moN group. And Rick Maloney has built a series of modules that will form a reverse loop. So, we'll actually be able to do out and back operations now with the Free-moN group. And so it's between those two things, I think it's going to add a lot of dimension to what we can do at shows and in operations and so on. So that's it.
We're looking forward to seeing it at the train show, Chris. What's your choice of static graphs applicator?
It is actually one I found on eBay, and it had been, the reason I went with it is I don't know if anyone's familiar with the Railwire. I think Mark is, but it's kind of an old school message board type platform. And there are some top-notch modelers on that platform. And there was a discussion about applicators, and several people had mentioned this one applicator that they got off of eBay. It was cost effective, and it was powered by a wall wart instead of batteries. So the static charge that it generated was a lot higher than a lot of the battery operated ones. And they said, they swore by it. So I thought, you know what, I'll try it. I think it was about $60, and that's, it's more than the fly swatter one that you get from Micromark, and it's less than the knock applicator that you can buy from Germany. So it was kind of in the middle of the road, and it's great. It's been great. I think I paid around $60 for it shipped, and I would totally recommend it.
Do you think you can track down the link to that?
I can probably do that. And the thing I'm curious about, I've not tried the new Woodland Scenics applicator, but it is very similar to the one that I use. So I'm wondering if they are just importing that one and putting their name on it. So it may be of similar quality. I don't know, but yeah, I'll find the eBay link and post it either in the chat or email it to you.
And Chris, that was the presenter of a couple weeks ago. That was one of the things that he spoke about, and you and I have spoke about that, is that some of the knockoffs or even some of the ones that you would, not the notch, but some of the others that you'd pay more than just the fly swatter one, that they still don't have that good of a or high of a charge, and that kind of takes away from your finished product. And the other thing that I was saying is that And I don't know if yours has it, but different screens that you can put in for
Mhm.
different size grasses, and that seemed to be another thing that the knockoffs didn't have. Or
Actually, this one
we
came
have
with
some of
3
the
different
higher.
screens.
I'm sorry, Chris, I was talking over
The
you.
one I used, that's a knockoff, it
Yeah.
actually does come with 3 different screens.
Yeah,
So
and
which
that
is
was
handy.
one of the things that he was saying, that if you're getting too much product through the screen, then you're not going to have as good a result. So
Mhm.
Chris,
Yeah.
I applaud your fencing around the soybean field. That's a detail a lot of modelers miss altogether, and that's the fact that most railroad right of ways were fenced. And as far as the headroom to turn a tractor around on the Rock Island's line from Iowa Falls up to Esterville, the farmers started plowing, and they would go almost up to the edge of the ballast and plant corn. And they had gotten to the point where some of these farmers were actually paying the railroad to rent the land on the right of way, and I guess others saw it and they didn't realize that their neighbors were actually paying the railroad, and they thought, well, if they can do it, I can do it. So and they started plowing up to nearly to the edge of the, well, if you could have found ballast on that line, it would have been the edge of the ballast. But so anyway, the railroad hired, they do contractors anymore for a weed spray train, and these weed spray cars can spray out to the right of way fences. And they sent the train master up through there with the property maps, and everybody who was growing corn on the Rock Islands right away that paid for the privilege didn't get sprayed, and the folks that were just squatting did get sprayed. They had some real hostile farmers after that, because that stuff worked pretty good. It killed that corn better than a doornail.
Wow. Well, I grew up in a rural area in southern Indiana, and part of that time was out near Lanesville, Indiana, and we had, our house was literally in the middle of farm fields. And so yeah, fences, wood fences, barbed wire fences, all that. It's just like I can't disassociate a field and a barbed wire fence. So just from childhood experience and climbing over the thing so often. So yeah, that's always I think a fun detail to include.
Well, there's an art climbing over a barbed wire fence. I haven't been able to get Russell to bite on fencing his right of ways yet, but I don't have the heart to do it since he's deep in the signal project.
Well, I tell you, the Woodland Scenics fence, that I was real happy with that. I would use that again in a heartbeat. So, and it really does make easy work of it. I've used photo etched barbed wire fence before, and it works, but you bump it and it's bent and all that. And this has a little bit of give to it. So if you bump it, it's okay. You're not going to deform the fence in the process. And even if you were to break one of the strings, it's a broken piece of barbed wire. I mean, that happens all the time. I've seen plenty of fences with strands laying, the occasional strand laying on the ground between fence posts. So it's, it works.
Any other questions from Chris before we say goodbye?
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. We're looking
Yeah,
forward to seeing that.
Thank you, Chris.
Sure. Thank you, guys.
That looks great as always, Chris.
And thank you, Mike.
thanks, guys. Good gathering today. Appreciate your time.